All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to have another of our amazing virtual water management virtual workshop series to share with you tonight. Um, Couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you can keep your mic on mute while we're in our presentation, we'll have time for questions towards the end after our presentation. You don't have to keep your camera on if you don't want to, but we always like to see lots of faces in the crowd. So we thank you for those that do keep their camera on. And other than that, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat and we'll answer them as we can. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So welcome to Revealing Payahinadu Water Management Virtual Workshop Series number 4. Tonight we'll be hearing from our guest speaker, Lauren Rose, about the annual operations plan. Revealing Payahinadu is a collaborative effort between Friends of the Inyo, the Owens Valley Indian Water Commission, and Accelerate Resilience Los Angeles. The intention of our program is to share information on the impacts of water extraction in Inyo and Mono County and help the community envision a healthier future for people and the land. We believe that being fully informed on the past, present, and future water conditions will equip our communities to advocate for a better water future. Water is life, and the well-being of all depends on protecting and stewarding our watershed. Next slide. So what does Payahinadu mean? So Payahinadu is the original place name for what we now call the Owens Valley, or this part of the Eastern Sierra. It translates to the land of flowing water, or the land where water always flows. This is the original place name from the Numu or Paiute people. So rather than passing the mic around to everyone for introductions, we're going to ask you to drop your name, your organization, and your home waters in our chat, and we can get to know each other a little better. Next slide. My name is Charlene Buff. I'm a water empowerment organizer for Friends of the Inyo and a member of the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone tribe here in Lone Pine. My home waters are the lower Owens River and Patsiata.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Ontiveros. I'm also a water empowerment organizer, and my home waters where I am grateful to be living now is the Owens River watershed, so in near Bishop Creek.
And my name is Lauren Rose. I'm the water justice organizer at Friends of the Inyo, and my home waters are called Oso Creek today. And yeah, it goes right by my house, and I am really grateful to live right there. So yeah, we're really excited to hear about everyone else's home waters, and this can be water that you live nearby, or water that you just have a strong relationship to, a strong kinship with. It could be a water that you maybe are separated from, that you think about and you want to be able to steward. So, yeah, we interpret the question broadly.
So just to kind of orient us with where we are in the workshop series, so this is our fourth virtual workshop. Um, And we have one more online after this. And what we've covered so far in kind of understanding water management in Payahinadu, and particularly the Inyo LA Long-Term Water Agreement, we've gone through kind of a history and context of that on the first session. We heard about on-off well management from Sally Manning on the second session. We heard about the LADWP mitigation projects in the area from Lynn Bolton on our third session. And then we'll hear from Lauren tonight. And then we do have one in-person water walk remaining. So that's this Saturday on April 4th. I'll put the registration link for that in the chat in just a second. That has all the details. It's going to be at Patsiata, also known as Owens Lake. And then 2 weeks from today is April 16th, so that'll be our last virtual session about the impacts of groundwater extraction, and we'll be talking a little more specifically about places in the valley that have seen those impacts. And so that's where we are. So we can go to the next slide. And just a reminder that we have on our website, which is ourwaterstory.org. We have some virtual courses that go through the history of Paeahinatu and tell the water story, and then a basics of water management course. That's a good reference with kind of some definitions of basic terms. And then the recordings for these virtual workshops are getting posted on the website as well. So there's now a resources page with a link to that and to the presentation slides. So that I'll send a follow-up email probably early next week with the link to that page specifically for everyone to reference the recordings. And then we can go on to the next slide. I'm going to hand it back to you, Lauren.
Sorry about that. I am sharing my screen with my single screen. Sadly, I need to get on that double monitor game and was struggling to bring up the mute and unmute button. But we did it. I'm unmuted and let's go. So today we are talking about the annual operations plan. I should have titled my slide Annual Operations Plan, but instead I titled it Spring Water Meetings, which is sort of the significance of the annual operations plan for all of us in the public. It's that there are a lot of meetings for us to go to. So we'll be talking about all of those today, what the annual operations plan is, and all that stuff. So we are part of the Eastern Sierra Water Alliance. That group, the official members are the Owens Valley Indian Water Commission, the Range of Light group of the Sierra Club, and then Friends of the Inyo. But we have many, many other people as well who come and join our meetings. They are fully open to everybody who wants to join and get involved and learn more about what we're doing to try to protect our waters and lands and people here in the Eastern Sierra. So if you would like to join future meetings, please just let us know. Yes, and you can find our website is easternsierrawater.org for updates about these meetings, talking points, summaries of what happened in previous meetings and other stuff like that. So that brings us to what we will talk about today. So we're going to go through a fair number of topics, but I think this will be helpful, hopefully, for orienting us because trying to be involved in the public meetings process can be really overwhelming, especially for these topics and especially in this April to May session. So we are going to talk about the different public bodies involved here. There are a lot of different players from LA and from Inyo County, and it can be a little bit confusing. So we're going to go through them to start with. Then we're going to talk about the meetings that you can expect this spring from April to May. Then we'll talk about how did this meeting series go last year. And then this will lead us into discussing the dispute resolution process between Inyo County and Los Angeles. And then we will talk about goals for this spring session. So, and just a little bit about these spring meetings. I've mentioned the annual operations plan a couple of times. So this is LADWP, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It's their annual plan that runs from this current water year to the next water year, which is April of this year. So it just started yesterday. The runoff year from April 1st to May 31st. So this is sort of our water new year in a way. And that means that they have to, LADWP needs to decide how much water it's going to pump and what it's going to focus on in its water management over the next year. Granted, a lot of this annual operations plan is the same every year because for the most part, LADWP is not very active in trying new things and in doing that land stewardship and that water stewardship that we would like to see. So a lot that we end up talking about is its conduct with the mitigation projects come up because they're part of this annual operations plan. And the amount of pumping comes up, the vegetation monitoring systems are a part of this. So it's a big plan, but we end up focusing especially on the groundwater pumping aspects of it. All right. So we have a lot of public bodies that are involved in deciding how much water will be extracted each year. So to start going through that a little bit, on one side, we have Inyo County. Oh, and let me just say this stems from the long-term water agreement, which we've discussed at an earlier session of this series. So please feel free, if you haven't seen that earlier session, to go back and watch. But this is the main agreement that guides the water management in our valley. It's from 1991, and it puts some limits on LADWP's pumping. But as we have learned over the last 35 years that it's been in place, there is a lot of room for improvement in how we can use this document to better protect our ecosystems and our waters. And so what we're really focused on, especially because LA likes to lean back on the long-term water agreement and say, we're doing this. We're fulfilling this agreement. They choose a bare minimum bar, and we have the language in the agreement to actually push them a lot further. So that's some of the background context behind our approach to these spring meetings, to the annual operations plan. But to rewind a little bit, to go back to what public bodies are involved. This long-term water agreement is between Inyo County and LADWP. These are the only two bodies that have any power in this agreement. The public can come give public comment, and we are using that for everything we've got, but Inyo County represents us in this agreement. So there are the Board of Supervisors. They have the ultimate power of directing what goes on in Inyo County. There's the Inyo County Water Department, which is at the staff level. There are scientists. They do all of this technical work. They are measuring vegetation over time. They are measuring well fields. So this is sort of the technical staff level. And then there's the Inyo County Water Commission, which is confusing. It's a one-word difference between these two bodies, but they are quite different. So the water department is part of the county. It is the staff enacting everything relating to water. The Inyo County Water Commission is actually a public advisory body that is meant to represent the public in this process. So this is where a lot happens, or a lot can happen. So the Inyo County Water Commission has, I believe, five commissioners. They are appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and they hold meetings where they hear from the public. They can request studies be done. They can request certain actions that the Board of Supervisors should take. They can run educational presentations, educational workshops for the public and for the Board of Supervisors. So the Inyo County Water Commission is where where the public has the most voice in sort of pushing on this process, because the Inyo County Water Commission makes recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and then the Board of Supervisors directs the staff at the Inyo County Water Department. So I know it's confusing, but I'm happy to go through it again in questions at the end if folks have more thoughts or want to go through that process again. But these are the main bodies to keep in mind from Inyo County. Then on the LADWP side, there's the Board of Commissioners that is at that highest level of LADWP. They steer the ship. And then there's the Eastern Sierra staff. So the Eastern Sierra staff of LADWP does a lot of that same kind of parallel work that the Inyo County Water Department does. So we have technical staff on both levels here. And a lot of people, especially if you're from Los Angeles, think that that folks from Los Angeles, from LADWP, will be down in Los Angeles. But actually, the LADWP has a really robust staff that live in the Eastern Sierra, that do their work in the Eastern Sierra, that often have a pretty deep knowledge of what's going on. And so it's important to kind of be aware that they are also local in that way, even though they represent the interests of a metropolitan municipal utility from 200 plus miles away. So we have the two sides that are part of this long-term water agreement, and the long-term water agreement creates some joint bodies that have the power, ostensibly, of steering what goes on within Payakanadu when it comes to this water management that LADWP does. So first of all, there's the technical group. Surprise, surprise, the members of the technical group draw from the technical staff from either group. So this is members from the Inyo County Water Department and the Eastern Sierra LADWP staff. They sit on the technical group together. So the technical group is where the nitty gritty happens. It's was envisioned that way. It's where staff talk to each other. They do cooperative studies. They argue about the significance of certain changes of what we see going on in the valley, and that is sort of the base level of analyzing what's going on within Owens Valley. The more power holders, the people that sort of direct what's going on with the technical group, is the standing committee. And so they draw from the Board of Supervisors and the Board of Commissioners and the Inyo County Water Commission. So I know that is a lot, but basically the standing committee it's sort of the peak of the joint work that Inyo County and LADWP do. And they don't meet that often. They have a lot of power through these documents to meet very significantly, to be working on adaptive management in the valley, in trying to be nimble, trying new things, trying to take better care of our vegetation and our waters. But they tend to meet 2 to 4 max times a year. Usually it's 3 times a year. But when we have members of the Board of Commissioners, the most powerful people at LADWP, the Board of Supervisors, the most powerful people in Inyo County, and members of the Inyo County Water Commission, all in that same room together, it can be pretty impactful to hear from the public, to try to push the standing committee to direct changes to happen at the technical group level. So those are the different groups that we have going on. And I can return to this slide if need be. I've been so seeped in this stuff that I think that it makes a lot of sense in my head, but I understand if we need to talk about it, explain it in some different ways as we get to questions. So that takes us to the spring water meeting series. And I'm actually, well, I'll go through these first, and then we have an excellent graphic that Charlene made for us that can help sort of conceptualize the flow of these plans. But this series of meetings is how we get to a finalized annual operations plan. And it's challenging. It's quick. It's a little hard to empathize with the folks who originally agreed to this timeline from the county, because it is pretty darn hard to intervene in this process. But we are building steam each year, and I think we're all feeling really good going into this spring about how this will go this year. We'll get further into that, but just to discuss this timeline, on April 20th, LADWP will release their draft annual operations plan. So that is their first version. Then Um, well, there's this whole process that's behind the scenes of these dates that's in 10 day within 10 days, this group has to meet. Within 10 days, this other group has to meet. But I'll just walk you through it for the actual dates that we've got. I think that can be, if anyone wants to hear the background of the 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, I am happy to talk you through that. But I think it's a little besides the point because the dates have already been set. And I will say a benefit this year compared to last year is that we did not have these dates last year until way further along in this process. So Inyo County has really been pushing for us in getting these dates publicized sooner. But yes, so to start, LA will release its draft plan. Then 3 days later, Inyo County will produce their draft recommendations in response to the plan. So that's what they would like to see changed. It's what they agree with, what they disagree with. It's usually a letter of comments and suggestions of things they would like to see different. So Inyo County drafts that and brings it to the Inyo County Water Commission. So that's this April 23rd date. So right now we have a draft and we have another draft. Um, and at this Inyo County Water Commission meeting, the public can comment on the draft version of Inyo County's recommendations. So this is a time when folks from Inyo County can learn about what Inyo County is thinking of recommending and push for something more or something different, or voice their appreciation and satisfaction if they're happy with the initial draft. But this is our sort of big initial public moment is commenting on the draft recommendations from Inyo County. Then on April 28th, those draft recommendations with the changes recommended by the Water Commission goes up to the Board of Supervisors. So if you remember from this chart, at this point, we're on this level. Can you see you can see my cursor, right? Okay, cool. I've been doing a lot of gesturing with the cursor and just realized maybe you can't see it. So yes, that's at this level, it's Inyo County Water Department presenting to the Water Commission. And then the commission is making recommendations for changes, which goes up to the Board of Supervisors because they have the final decision power. So at this Board of Supervisors meeting, the supervisors can decide on the changes to the draft recommendations if they agree with them. So between these two meetings, we have a lot of nerves of if we're happy with where the Water Commission has recommended changes coming from Inyo County's side, it has to be finalized by the Board of Supervisors. So that is the next meeting that especially folks from Inyo County should mark on their calendars that your supervisors want to hear from you about if you'd like them to accept these changes or not. So after that meeting, the Board of Supervisors has given their direction about the finalized recommendations from Inyo County, and Inyo County finalizes their recommendations. They write up whatever changes have been recommended. They finish up their draft and they release a final version of Inyo County's comments on the draft AOP. So now we have a draft annual operations plan and we have finalized recommendations for changes to that plan from Inyo County. So how do these two things come together? Ostensibly, it's at the technical group meeting. So according to the long-term water agreement, at this staff level, at this joint group that has staff members on both sides, this meeting in the annual operations plan process, they are supposed to resolve these changes, resolve the differences between LA's draft plan and what Inyo wants to see changed. Now, what does resolve mean? That is the challenge. Basically, we'll discuss how this went last year in a moment, but Basically, LA doesn't want to hear what Inyo County has to say. So this is where Angelenos come in. Because LA might not care a ton about Inyo County's comments and their recommendations for change, but they care what their ratepayers have to say. They care what folks down in Los Angeles have to say. So this meeting is important for us to put pressure on LA to resolve the differences between Inyo County's comments and their draft plan. And that's where we need folks from Los Angeles to plug in and put that pressure on the Eastern Sierra staff to say, we drove up here. We came to this meeting to urge you to listen to what Inyo County has to say. So after that meeting finishes, we get the finalized annual operations plan. I have likely here because this is one of these 10-day gaps where it's within 10 days they need to finalize their plan. But we believe that will be May 15th. And at that point we see whether or not LA has listened to what Inyo County wants to see changed. Spoiler alert, they rarely listen, which is why we're really excited to have folks from Los Angeles joining us and taking an active step into this process because that is where we have the most pressure and leverage that we can exert on this process. Then finally, the last meeting in this bonanza is May 27th, the standing committee meeting. So that is bumping up to this higher level, the decision makers. That's where we have Board of Commissioners. We have 2 commissioners there. We have 2 supervisors there. We have 2 water commissioners there. There's lots of similar bureaucratic names, but we've got a lot of big players in the room. And while the annual operations plan has been finalized before this meeting, it's a time where we can speak to those decision makers and to the people with power and comment on how this process went, what we would like to see differently, what we're happy about, what we're not happy about. And we can get the ball rolling in terms of pushing the standing committee to direct the technical group and other players here to make changes while we head into the summer. So we have a much prettier graphic rather than a list of bullet points. But you can see here that we have this flow. It's a flow that goes really quick. It is a rushing river taking us from meeting to meeting. But you can see that we have the draft annual operations plan. Then we go to Water Commission meeting. This is Inyo County Public. Then Board of Supervisors, where they decide about the final comments from Inyo County on this draft plan. On April 30th, they'll be releasing these final comments. Then we have the technical group meeting where they try to resolve these differences, ostensibly. Then May 14th, 15th, somewhere around there, LA will release the final AOP, and then we have the standing committee meeting. So that leads us to how did this go last year? So these are just some photos to start with from some of these public meetings. You see there's hybrid components for some of them, not for all of them. It's a lot of sitting together in rooms and taking notes and waiting for public comment. But last year was a huge step forward. Last year was really, really uplifting. There's a lot we could do to analyze how this meeting series went last year, but I've written some positives, some really like good optimistic things that we can build on for this year, and some things that didn't go so well, some things that stayed frustrating that we can also focus on for this year. So first of all, we had a huge increase in public participation, which we're trying to build on. In past years, for the most part, this is such a dense process with so many different confusing bodies, with such a long series of meetings, that it was pretty hard for the public to be a part of it. The meetings got announced right before they happened, and for the most part, we had really dedicated folks, a handful of folks who would come to these meetings regularly, but we didn't have as much participation from the broader public. So last year, we started getting folks from the broader public. We had a lot of people from Inyo County start to get involved. Um, and we also had folks from LA joining, I believe, for the first time at the technical group meeting. If we go back to our little flow here from last year, at the technical group meeting, this is where Angelenos can start exerting some pressure on this process. We had folks drive up. This is that technical group meeting last year, and drive up 5, 6 hours and come sit in Bishop and speak directly to the Eastern Sierra staff of LADWP. And you could feel the difference in the room from having Angelenos there with us. Um, Having those folks, it was just a handful. I think we had 3 people drive up, but you could feel the difference that it made. And we really want to build on that going forward this year. So that was a huge win, but a win that we want to build on because we had bigger public participation. You can see a lot of these chairs are filled, but we want to stuff these rooms this year. There is room to grow in that realm. So another really exciting takeaway from last year was that Inyo County, in this process of constructing their comments and their recommendations, they recommended a dramatic decrease in LADWP's pumping numbers. So in the past, as we go through this process, um, where I'm not sure which one is better to show, um, but around here between these 2 meetings, Inyo County Water Department comes up with their draft comments. At the Inyo County Water Commission meeting, they tended to just give a thumbs up for the most part to whatever the Inyo County Water Department had produced. And for the most part, the water department would just recommend of whatever pumping range LA suggested. They would say, please do the lower one. Please do that one, the smaller end of the spectrum. And that was frustrating because a lot of the people who are deep in this work, who know the technical knowledge of this stuff, would say we can go lower. They gave us a pumping range, but we can go way lower than the lower end of that range. But the Inyo County Water Commission tended to sort of give that give that to staff, give that respect in a way to staff of just being like, we'll go with what you say. But last year we started forging a bit of a new relationship where we can say we really respect the work and appreciate the work that Inyo County Water Department is doing, and we want to support that work and push this further. We want to ask for more reductions in the amount that LA is taking from this area. So one of the big successes from last year was that it started with the public at the Inyo.
We've got a freeze. We'll just give her a second. Hopefully she comes right back on. While we wait a second, just a reminder, folks, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll read them out at the end. Or if you participated in this meeting process last year, as Lauren kind of talks about takeaways, feel free to, oh, yeah, she dropped off. All right. Hopefully she'll be right back on. Then maybe we can hear from folks, anyone who was in that participating in that meeting series last year, um, kind of your takeaways from that process or your thoughts, or I know there's people who've been participating in this for many, many years. So if anyone has any thoughts they want to share or questions to bring up now. Oh, here she is. She's coming back in. And I put a link in the chat to the Inyo County Water Department website that has the calendar with these meetings on it as well. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, I am so sorry about that. My power went out. So
Whoa.
it is dark and I'm on my hotspot. I will be lit by the power of my laptop for now. And let's hope my battery power stays it keeps us through.
Okay.
Um so yeah, I'm sorry about to just drop off like that. Should I just keep going?
Yeah,
Um
I think just hop right back in.
okay, sounds good. Thank you for staying Valley.
All good. Oh,
Oh,
yeah, solid. It is windy
um,
right now. I don't know
yeah,
if you're getting
yeah.
wind where you are, but
Um, all right. Thank you for sticking with us. I really appreciate that. So I will, can I get host privileges again?
yes,
I can't
I
share.
just, it should work now.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We're back. Oh, slideshow. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna keep going then. I have to find my train of thought after everything went dark. I got a little discombobulated. So, yeah, we were talking about the historic or recently historic. We've had some discussions about whether we can call this decrease in the recommended pumping historic or not, because we don't have a very clear record of everything that's happened going way in the past. But I can say for the folks involved, they could not remember a time when with this meeting and between these two meetings, that Inyo County recommended such a big decrease from LA's draft plan. It was really exciting, and it started from the public. For those of you who were there, um, I'm sure you remember the feeling in the room was electric at this meeting, at this Water Commission meeting last year, as we discussed this in depth. We heard from so many members of the public. It was a really deep discussion. And ultimately, through that public pressure and that public just group realization sort of together that we could ask for more, they did ask for more. They asked for much bigger decreases. And then at the Board of Supervisors meeting, the supervisors approved this decrease. It went forward. They fully changed they updated the draft comments from Inyo County and went with these like dramatic decreases. So that was really exciting. Ultimately, I believe we recommended about 20,000 acre feet under what LADWP was was suggesting in their draft plan last year. And ultimately, they decreased the projected pumping range by 5,000 acre feet. So that was pretty big. They didn't attribute it to the work from Inyo County at all. But a win is a win. Even if they do not want to engage in the process in that way of saying why, they did not give any reasoning for why they decreased by 5,000 acre feet. But ultimately, at the end of this public process, they decided that their range would be lowered by 5,000 acre feet. So that was a
Wow.
win we want to build on for this year. Now, some thumbs down, frustrating things, the takeaways that were not so happy. Um, but things that are good to know, context from last year that we can take going into this year for things that we want to change. First of all, Inyo County and LA did not resolve the differences between the draft AOP and the county's comments. So in here, the meeting that is technically they are supposed to resolve their differences. When we have a draft and we have a draft plan and a final recommendation from Inyo County, when we're at the technical group, that is the goal of this meeting. And they did not reach any sort of resolution. And in that meeting, Inyo County did not did not sort of dig their heels in to stand up for that resolution. So that was frustrating for some members of the public. We had a really strong public outcry, but when the ball was thrown to Inyo County Water Department in that meeting, they sort of let the process continue how it has in the past, which is that LA says they'll think about it and not resolve anything there in person at that time, but that they'll consider these comments. Which of course means that they will do their own, they'll take it, but they don't actually engage with Inyo County's comments. So that was a disappointment from last year, but one that I think that we can hope for better this year, especially with more Angelenos telling Los Angeles that we want them to actually do what they are told in this agreement they always circle back to and actually resolve these differences. Second, LA refused to acknowledge Inyo County's dramatic pumping reduction recommendations. So in this really exciting dramatic decrease in LADWP's pumping numbers, LA did their best to ignore it. It was really frustrating for those of us who were there. Instead, LA pointed with this 5,000 acre feet decrease. They ignored this whole process that we had gone through, and they instead only referred to Inyo County's draft comments. Before this process had happened, this draft comment created by Inyo County, that was the one they said, we're in those comments, Inyo County had only asked for about, I think, a 4,000 or 5,000 acre foot decrease due to just one specific well field, not this bigger sort of attempting to reduce extraction on the whole. They had a complaint about a single well field and therefore recommended slightly reduced pumping. And LA, they said, hey, we're in line with Inyo County. We did this slight reduction in pumping, completely ignoring the fact that after this public process had finished, the official comments from Inyo County was asking for a much bigger reduction. So that's something that we can work on our side, on the Inyo County side, this year. I think having those initial recommendations at the very start of this process be lower will give LA less to work with. And then finally, LA did not incorporate the public input from this whole series of meetings when revising the annual operations process or the annual operations plan. So they ignored Inyo County's comments for the most part, but they also they don't have a legal obligation to listen to the public. But ultimately, their bosses should be LA ratepayers. And they ignored all of the comments that we had from Angelenos last year, and we were asking for many more things than just reduced pumping. We had specific comments on wells that we thought needed to be turned off. We had specific comments on the vegetation monitoring system for changes that we wanted to see in the upcoming year. And they didn't take any of that into account. So this year, our goal is to start earlier with getting public input into this process, and to see if we can exert more pressure with more folks, with a bigger public upswell to have LA incorporate more of what the public wants to see, which is less extraction from Payahunadu. Okay, so I recognize that we are inching closer to 7. I know we have until 7:30 technically, but I am going to maybe move us along a little bit quicker, and so we can have enough time for questions before folks have to go. But you might ask, LA ignored Inyo County's actual recommendations in this process. they refused to acknowledge that LA wanted much bigger reductions for this past year. There's a lot of, they often don't acknowledge the county's comments in full, which are much bigger than just a pumping number. So what next? What can Inyo County do in this long-term water agreement to push back on LA's enormous power in this process? That takes us to dispute resolution, a topic that's also complicated and can be a little dense, can be a little fraught, because LA has much more power in this relationship than Inyo County does. And so engaging in this dispute resolution process is actively engaging with is injecting a lot of friction into this relationship. Um, and it is opening us up for retaliation because LADWP does retaliate. But this is the process we've got. And so a lot of folks who have been in this work for a long time believe we should be using dispute resolution a lot more than we are. So, what is this process of dispute resolution, and why does Inyo County not do it more often? Why is it not disputing things left, right, and center? So this is the process of dispute resolution as told in the long-term water agreement. It has three main phases of attempting to resolve the dispute at each of these phases. So the first one, unsurprisingly, starts with the technical group and the standing committee, because those are the two bodies that have the joint power in this water management system. So either party can submit a request detailing this dispute to the technical group or the standing committee. It usually starts in the technical group because disputes are usually about the technical level. It's about vegetation or it's about water pumping numbers. But technically, it can go to the standing committee as well. But because it's usually at the technical group, the next step is the technical group meeting and attempting to resolve the dispute. What does this look like? Not much. They're supposed to resolve it, but LA is not great at engaging in a good faith process of resolving anything, as we see in this technical group meeting as part of the spring water process. So if they can't reach a resolution, they need to create a report on the relevant agreements and disagreements on either side. So this is a long, long document, and it goes through all of the different arguments on both sides about this given dispute, and sort of the factual reasoning why, all of the argumentation, all the necessary facts related to it, and then this report goes up to the standing committee, and they attempt to resolve the dispute based on this information from our technical staff. So with this process, trying to think of when to, so basically the standing committee attempts to resolve this dispute. They often also don't resolve the dispute. So the real meat and potatoes of dispute resolution is these bottom two, and mostly it's mediation. So if the standing committee fails to resolve this dispute after they have this report, after the technical group has gone back and forth, then either party can submit a request to start the mediation and arbitration process. So in that process, Inyo County appoints one mediator, LA appoints another mediator, and then each of those mediators together appoint a third mediator. So then it's a team of three. And technically, by the letter of this agreement, they have 60 days to come up with a mediated resolution or findings or directives. It's a somewhat vague description of what they come up with, but basically they come down with their findings. And they can either come up with a mediated resolution within that time frame, or mediation also might fail. So if mediation fails, then either party can submit a, I'm not sure the legal language, but submit a complaint, can get the process started in the courts. So once this has been submitted to the court, each party has to write a memorandum about their side of the dispute, the legal and the factual issues behind their side of this argument. They have to write a joint memorandum also going through these, and then the judge issues a binding decision. So for the most part, we have folks in the audience who have seen Inyo County go through this dispute resolution process and have more expertise than I do on this. But from what I've learned, I believe that mediation is often where this process stops. But there is a court option as well. And to kind of concretize this a little bit, to give us a little something to work with, oh, okay, I have an example coming up. But before we go through that example, some of the problems with this system is that you might hear folks talking about that it's expensive, that Inyo County has so much less money than LA does, that LA can afford any of these steps more easily than Inyo County can. Um, but it is good to note it doesn't necessarily need to be so expensive. This depends on who Inyo County hires for their mediator, um, and how long this process ends up taking. That being said, if it does go to the courts, then legal fees are quite expensive. Also, within this process, I've boiled it down to its basics, but it's this very long section in the long-term water agreement. Um, and there's a lot of slippage within this dispute resolution process. Now, what do I mean by that? It's that it looks very official. It's rules set out. It's got a lot of clarity of you go from this to this, this to this. If this happens, you do this. It feels clear when you're reading it. But actually, if you read between the lines a little, and especially if you look at past history, there's a lot of places where it doesn't actually go that way. So, for instance, the standing committee can decide not to follow the mediated resolution. Mediation can lead to a resolution, a directive of what the two parties should do, but the standing committee can decide just not to do that. And similarly, parties can agree at the technical group level or the standing committee level at different points. They can agree to extend many of the timelines that are built into this process. So this process in the actual water agreement, it has it has numbers all over the place. Most things are to be done in 15 days. Some things you have 30 days, other things you have 60 days. But it's very clear that this process is meant to clip along at a certain pace. But the parties can just ask for much more time than is given in the actual dispute resolution process. And this is where we have a bit of a challenge if Inyo County does not hold these lines really firm. In the past, LA has pushed for more time and more time. They can hire consultants in these different reports and memorandums. LA has been given the time by Inyo County to pile a lot more on there. And so this slippage can be to our disadvantage if our representatives are not holding firm about the actual terms of dispute resolution. That being said, it takes too long when there's slippage about time. It also takes too long, even within the planned amount of time. Most pumping in our area goes from April through September. And for this whole process of if you picture between each of these steps, 15 days, another 15 days, 30 days, another 15 days, 60 days, that can last months at minimum. And so for sometimes if Inyo County has submitted a dispute about, say, pumping numbers, This mediated resolution might come out in August. I believe it has in the past. And by that point, LA has done most of its pumping. There is no directive that LA, oh, I have light again. Excellent. There is no directive that LA stops what it's doing while this process is going on. So, they can keep pumping, they can keep doing whatever they were doing that led to this dispute. And that can be really, really damaging to our environment. Um, so I want to just touch on a example of a dispute resolution, a dispute that happened about a little over 10 years ago now. And again, we have folks here in the audience who know a lot more details about this. So I'm just going to give a basic primer, but would love to hear more if anyone in the audience wants to add more once I'm through. Or add more details. I've just done a lot of reading of all of these different reports that are generated, all these different memorandums, um, and it's pretty fascinating to learn about. So BlackRock 94 is a parcel that was nearby really extensive pumping in the 70s and into the 80s. Um, and so it was being damaged pretty um, I'm sorry. It was getting dry. It was really experiencing pumping impacts. It had been an alkali meadow, and as you can see, this picture from 1988, this is after pumping impacts had already impacted the meadow, but you can see how green it is. Um, and then you can see here in this report that Inyo County Water Department put together as a part of this dispute resolution, you can see how dry and shrubby it is. And in this process, we've learned that, or in discussing, especially with Sally Manning, she mentioned that Inyo County Water Department noticed impacts on BlackRock 94 starting in the late 90s. So the fact that this alkali meadow was struggling was recognized like so much longer before this process started, so much earlier than when this process started. So this process, people noticed it, but nothing was done starting in the late 90s. Then in 2007, the California Native Plant Society submitted a letter to Inyo County, or perhaps it was the technical group, about BlackRock 94 and the changes that were happening there. But it took Inyo County another 4 years until 2011 to begin this dispute resolution process. And it ran for 3 years. So clearly, our chop, chop, chop approach to the letter of the law here for dispute resolution was not followed. And ultimately, let me go back here to this process. It started in the technical group. They did not, they met, they attempted to resolve the dispute, and surprise, surprise, they failed. So this report was created with the agreements and disagreements. Standing committee also failed to resolve this dispute. So several months later, there is more slippage in the time between these two processes starting. Inyo County submitted this dispute for mediation. The process of mediation took much longer than 60 days. It was a few months. And ultimately, they found the technical group hadn't done enough in analyzing the impacts on vegetation and the significance of those impacts. So they bounced this back up to the technical group, which then met to attempt to resolve the dispute. And finally, it landed back on the desk of the standing committee, and they agreed to follow a interim findings, an interim order from the mediators. So it was complicated. We bounced back and forth a few different times. But ultimately, they agreed on a provisional resolution. And maybe some folks in the audience will know, but I could not find a movement from provisional resolution to a final official resolution. At this point, this was in April of 2014 that the Standing Committee agreed on this provisional resolution. And both the LADWP Board of Commissioners and the Inyo County Board of Supervisors, those two top peak power holders in each of those in our flow chart, they had to agree on this to make it official. I don't believe they did. So this ended, I believe, and I have to be corrected, with a provisional resolution. And that's what they've been working from since then. So they reduced pumping from 12,300 acre feet on average from the pumps that were the wells that were impacting this area to 8,000 acre feet. Part of this provisional resolution was some prescribed burns in the area of a certain acreage that was supposed to help bring back or help encourage alkali meadows. And then with a, I think, ecological society of some sort. I'm not remembering the specific name. LA and Inyo County, the technical group, they were supposed to develop and implement vegetation monitoring procedures and better ways of attributing I think of deciding the significance of changes to vegetation. Ultimately, the pumping has been reduced to 8,000 acre feet and there are more grasses there than before, but the area has definitely not achieved full recovery. And I will say there is plenty of record from environmental groups at the time in 2014 saying that this provisional resolution would not achieve recovery. And it hasn't. There's more grasses, but there is not the alkali meadow that was there in 1988 or beforehand. This was still a damaged meadow from years of really aggressive pumping. Um, LA has completed the prescribed burns that they were told to do. They completed these in 2021. So it took them a while. And I cannot find any documentation about working with the Ecological Society to develop and implement these vegetation monitoring procedures. And in last year's annual operations plan, where LA provides updates about what it's doing, it's all of this management, they say that this BlackRock 94 provisional resolution is complete, that the project is done. That's that. So you can see this wasn't entirely satisfying. It took a lot of time. It didn't achieve the full results that we wanted, but there are some intermediary successes here of some grasses coming back, of reduced pumping, of some prescribed burns. Um, so yeah, we're left with this sort of ambiguous feeling of these are the tools we have, and they are very, very far from perfect. They are stacked against Inyo County, but it's a tool that we do have in our toolkit. So finally, I just want to end discussing dispute resolution is kind of depressing. It kind of seeps the hope out just a little bit. So I want to turn us back to our vision for this spring. And this really focuses, like I mentioned earlier, on increasing participation from folks in the public, both in Inyo County and in the LA area. And it's pretty exciting. We have spent the last year making some changes that I think are really going to impact us for this spring. So our lovely water empowerment organizers, Emily and Charlene, have made the Revealing Payahunadu program, which is spreading a lot of education about the water systems, primarily in Inyo County, but also down to LA. So folks are starting to learn more about this process, more about these impacts, and starting to get jazzed about wanting to get more involved. And on top of that, in this last year, our sort of network of organizers have really been getting to know increasing relationships with Angelenos who want to support us in this process. Especially at the Owens Valley Indian Water Committee, they have hired two organizers down in Los Angeles who have their own networks. We had a water summit down in LA that really helped bring together a lot of different environmental justice organizations from LA with folks coming down from Payahunadu. And we really committed, we've really increased relationships and developed and put time into relationships for folks who want to show up for Payahunadu. So there's a lot of hope going into this spring. And if you're here from LA, thank you. Thank you for being here. Also, folks from Inyo County, like each person who's taken the time to learn and to feel that sense that they can help make a difference, they can help push back in this process that can be so frustrating. Every single voice counts, and together we've seen the change that happens. It starts with the public. For BlackRock 94, like I mentioned, it's not on this slide, but it was a letter from the California Native Plant Society that got this process started. Inyo County fully acknowledges that that is where this started. And last year at the Inyo County Water Commission meeting, it was the public that led to those dramatically reduced pumping recommendations. So change is incremental. We're slowly working on this. We're slowly building, but we're really excited to work with all of you to try to make even bigger change this year. So that's all. I think it's time for questions. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Lauren. We haven't gotten any questions in the chat yet, but if people want to also raise your hand, unmute, and you can share a question out loud if you'd like.
One thing we were wondering is if folks who maybe participated, Sally, you're on. Great. I just want to say if any folks who are here in the room today, our virtual Zoom room, participated in the spring meeting series last year, we'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on how that felt, on how that went, and if you have any advice or thoughts for folks who might be joining for the first time this year.
Yeah, I was there last year, and well, first, Lauren, you did a really good job of explaining all this sort of cumbersome stuff, I have to say.
Thank you.
You made it interesting. Some good slides.
Wow.
At least, and I pretty much know it. I've been through it a few times myself, but the public really does need to put pressure on those people sitting at these meetings. The whole purpose of all of this is to protect our environment. And if we feel like that's not being accomplished, they need to be held accountable. But there's so many ways they've shielded themselves in the process. Yeah. And so it does help. And like you said, the California Native Plant Society had to finally get serious about what was going on in BlackRock 94, but our data were showing that when I worked at Inyo County Water Department early on, and they internally just refused to listen. And all the data they used in dispute resolution was stuff, we were collecting. It wasn't like we were oblivious, but it really took the public watching and, trying to hold the players accountable that moved it very, very slowly to not such a great resolution, but that's another story. But to get back to where we are now with the pumping plan, there's been, for the past so many years, just so much inertia. I mean, the standing committee, they don't want trouble. They just want to, rubber stamp things and move on and go back to their desks and be done with it. Both staffs on both sides. But what we do know, and because of that, we've got a lot of baggage that we have to deal with. And one of them is the fact that there is this thing that they refer to as minimum pumping each year. And so LA will calculate what they view as the minimal amount of pumping, and Inyo County will do their own calculations, and the numbers will be about the same because they know which pumps need to be operated, for example, for town water systems and for the fish hatcheries so the fish stay alive. And for a few of these irrigated pastures that they supposedly can't get water to any other way. And that's where the numbers shift from year to year. It's because if it's a really wet year, they can get the water there. But if it's a really dry year, they have to pump the water to get it there. And that happens in Laws, it happens in Bears George Wellfield, it happens a few places. So they can come up with this minimum pumping. And we're kind of stuck with that because we don't want to argue against our own, people here not getting, or, we don't want to have the fish die. So whatever. So we have to kind of go with that as the minimum pumping. And we know probably as of April 1st, when they project the snow melt runoff, what that will be. And so that's really the easiest recommendation to make, is just keep pumping at a minimum so that we can maintain water levels and that we can assess what's really going on in the valley after these 35 years of working under the water agreement. And so when they don't listen, we know we have like 3 options. One is to go to dispute, which you covered, and it's not the best way to go because, like you said, by the time we get through it, we usually lose, or we lose too much in the process, and it's too late anyway. So the water has already been pumped and down the aqueduct. The second thing would be for the public to just go berserk, to really, protest and signs and hunger strike or something. But, even then they may not really listen. But, that is a method that gets attention. We can't go to a lawsuit that I know of. So, that's not on the table. So the third thing is to get our people, our Inyo County water commissioners, and I know that our new chair, Paul Hewitt, doesn't want them to just be a pass-through thing. He wants them to, the water commission, to put things on the table that require some action and some changes. And so requesting the minimum pumping for now, while we look at the on-off method for monitoring, because that is the only thing, like I said in my talk, that triggers the well management. This year, we have 20 of the 22 permanent monitoring sites on status. They can pump just about every well in the valley this year, and that means over 200,000 acre feet of potential pumping. That's what's got to change. We've got to get some monitoring in that automatically protects the valley so that we aren't arguing over the pumping plan each year. And we know that there are ways to do this. And one is a section of the agreement that mentions that, things were experimental. We were still learning. We have a lot of data now. We have a lot of new technology that can be applied to monitoring and management that will leave a lot of, why wouldn't DWP agree to it if it gives them more predictive capability for what they're able to do? And they may not get all they want this year, but if they employ some of this new management, they space it out more. They know that maybe in 3 years they'll get to do more of what they want to do, not 20 years like some of those permanent monitoring sites shut them down. So anyway, so I see those 3 things, and dispute is not the best one. Public demand, we can try that. But the third one is to really start insisting that they change or update, update their work on developing more scientifically defensible monitoring protocols that inform pumping management. Did someone write that down? That's the way it probably should be said.
I grabbed a pen, but wasn't able to actually jot it down in time. It's on a recording. But yes, thank you, Sally. I agree with that. And I will just say, for the folks who are here, who maybe weren't, we recently had an Inyo County Water Commission meeting, and we agreed to start the process of, at that May 27th standing committee meeting, going back, this one that is after they've already finalized their operations plan. We have all these power holders in a room. And so one of our goals for this meeting this year is going to push for those changes to the monitoring approach. This starts with the standing committee because they are the ones that have the power. They are the ones who can actually direct the technical group to do things. So that is a great recommendation, and is definitely what we are pushing for, one of the things that we're hoping to push these powerful people to direct that we need to start making those changes.
You
So if
know,
anyone wants to come to that meeting and help us push for it, that would be great.
if any of you follow the Great Basin Air Pollution Control District, two of our supervisors sit on that board, and they perfectly well know that what they do at Great Basin is like incredible in terms of monitoring and management and technical ability and IT and computers and I mean GPS drones, all kinds of things. They're so far ahead. And I think this is kind of shame the Board of Supervisors into what's wrong with your water department? Why are we still stuck in like air photos or whatever we're doing with, sorry, but it's just get them kind of excited about applying new techniques and use their brains that are just sitting there being wasted to develop this new approaches. And we don't want them to just drop it down on us. I think we also want to be involved in the
Public
process,
input.
see it, chart it along and make sure it's trying to get to the goals that we'd like that the water agreement set out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will say, just for anyone who isn't aware in the audience, we are still using the methods agreed upon in 1991. That might, for people who aren't deep in this work, you might assume that these change over time, and they do for other agencies like Great Basin Air Pollution Control District. But we are stuck with methods from 1991. If you just take a sec to think about how much technology has changed by this year, 2026, just think about how much better the monitoring of what is going on in this valley could be. And there is an entire section in the water agreement about modifications and the fact that we can update the monitoring system. But LA doesn't want to do that because they're benefiting from it right now. Although, as Sally mentioned, in some ways, the current system we could try to spin it, but for the most part, they want to stick with what they've got because it's allowing them to take as much water as they want. Any other questions? Any questions spanning off of that?
I'd like to ask that since the last water commission meeting, Friends of the Inyo offered to, like NOR, to assist them with some data analysis. Has anything happened that we can talk about? So.
Yes, yeah, I'm happy to give an update on that. So yeah, we have a NOR here is going to be helping the Inyo County Water Department do some of this vegetation data analysis. Like Sally said, they gather a lot of data, but they don't really put it to use for creating, a dispute or something else if going a different direction. So Friends of the Inyo, the organization that me and Emily and Charlene work for, is also hiring NOR on as a extra capacity for Inyo County Water Department to analyze some of that data. That being said, this process works really slow. So before that help can begin, we need the Inyo County supervisors to direct the water department to accept that help and to accept that that is the direction they're going to be working on. We had this Inyo County Water Commission meeting on March 16th, and it's not going to be on the Board of Supervisors agenda until April 28th. It's not going to be on the agenda until this day. That's frustrating. We have help ready to go, ready to assist the Inyo County Water Department, but it is going to have to wait, according to our executive director, until we get that go ahead from the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. I also, while you were talking, I quickly looked up in the LA Board of Water and Power Commissioners also meets on April 28th. And two of them, as you know, sit on the standing committee. So maybe that's before the technical group meeting, but it might still be a way of communicating that we know full well now what at least the Water Commission is recommending, and like to bring it to the attention that and also
This is a great suggestion.
you
Yeah.
have people, I know, like Narit Katz is working on a PhD in ecology, and she obviously isn't still using techniques from the 90s or 80s that we were using back in the day. So she might be able to influence them in terms of updating monitoring. And I know that Teal asked the question, one of the weak links in vegetation monitoring is the human factor of reading these transects. And I know some people are very good at it, but even people on, the early in the morning versus late when it gets to be 102 degrees out there, and you're collecting data and stomping through weeds and sneezing and you got dirt all over and sweating. I mean, there are ways of now flying a drone over and collecting the data and go home, be done with it. And there's also satellite imagery that can be captured and used, or even from an airplane, I suppose. I mean, I don't even know what they all are. We have good ways of monitoring depth to water now. And what we also need to do is, so I was explaining to some people, there's like 700 DWP test wells that monitor depth to water in the valley, but really only about 40 of them tell us something useful for management. And the same with the vegetation parcels. And we have parcels that shouldn't even be delineated as parcels. And we have others that tell us, are shouting out to us what's happening, but they lump them all together and can't figure out anything, So there's just ways of teasing the information out of the data that needs to happen. And I think there was another technique, I can't remember.
Yeah, but I appreciate that suggestion that this flow, like I said, it goes fast. It makes it's hard to intervene. And so we kind of as a community of organizers from both Inyo County and Los Angeles have been trying to think as last year passed and we did this slip and slide, what we can do differently this year and how we can try to inject that public voice differently this year. So one of those strategies was having this Inyo County Water Commission meeting before April 20th. It was to try to push for some changes that we'd like to see from Inyo County and LA before April 20th. Like you heard me mention, it's a slow process. It didn't strike as effectively as we wanted, but we're trying these different things. And so I appreciate that, Sally, as a point that by this time, by April 28th, if LADWP Board of Commissioners, that peak, those powerful people from LA, if they're also meeting on this date, we'll have the Water Commission's recommendations by then. So perhaps we can have a contingent, especially of Angelenos, go to this LA board meeting on the 28th and starting to push the thing. This is also what's happening. This is what we'd like to see you all do at that meeting too. And we welcome any and all ideas for how to intervene and be creative in this process, just like that, because that's what we need to do. Also, it's 7:29, so I think perhaps we should wrap it up. I'll hand it back to Charlene and Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks, Sally, for sharing your thoughts, which are always valuable. And everyone else for being on with us. Really appreciate you. We'll be sending out the recording from this, so circulate it to all your people so that everyone knows what's coming up this spring and how they can be involved. And we'll be sharing those dates more in other places too, so that you can get those on your calendar.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was a really wonderful presentation. I feel like I just learned again everything. Like complete refresher.
Thank you, Lauren. That was fantastic.
Thanks. I'm glad. I know it's a lot. Thanks for hanging in there with me, everybody. And now let's go eat some dinner.
Yes.
Hope your lights stay on.
Thank you. Yeah, let's hope.
Maybe even-
Eating in the dark, eating with candles. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Have a good night too.
Everyone.
Thanks.